is no share of the world to come. What does it mean? Now, in the Rambam, if you look at what's written versus what's said in today's world, you'll see that there is a very, very big difference between the two. As a matter of fact, in Ilchot Teshuva, it talks about chapter 8, first halacha. Halacha means is law. This is it. It's final. Moshe from Sinai, Mount Sinai. It's not theory. It's not thought. It's not opinion. Halacha. Shulchan Aruch is based on a Rambam. So there's no such thing as I don't accept the Rambam. Like some idiots say today, no, we don't accept the Rambam. What do you mean you don't accept the Rambam? You accept Shulchan Aruch? Yeah, okay, Shulchan Aruch, Rambam. It's a few, differences, but overall, you can't say, no, Rambam's, it doesn't count or something like that, something crazy like that. No, I accept my Rebbe's halachot. Yeah, but he didn't write an halacha book. No, whatever he says. Okay, did he say anything about Shabbat? Did he say anything? Oh, he doesn't teach that yet. Okay, so what do you do then, until then? You just don't keep it? So, the Rambam says, in Yad HaChazakah, in Mishneh Torah, Ilchot Teshuva, first halacha. The good that's hidden for the righteous is the life of the world to come. This will be life which is not accompanied by death, and good which is not accompanied by evil. The Torah alludes to this in the promise in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 7, so that good will be granted to you and you will live long. The oral Torah explains, so that good will be granted to you. This is a world that's entirely good, and you will live long. This is a world that's endless. Okay, so here is the beginning where he says, this Olam HaBa is amazing, gives you a couple of sources of where it's from, and so on. As it continues in this halacha, he says, the retribution, the punishment of the wicked, is that they will not merit this life. Rather, they will be cut off and die. Which in Hebrew says, ikaretu v'yamutu. Whoever does not merit this life is truly dead and will not live forever. Rather, he will be cut off in his wickedness and perish as a beast. This is the intent of the meaning, the term karet in the Torah. For example, one of them is in last week's parasha, chapter 15, Numbers chapter 15, verse 31, where it states, the soul that surely be cut off, ikaret nefesh. Based on the repetition of the same word in the oral tradition, this explains ikaret means cut off from this world, and ikaret means cut off from the world to come. After these souls become separated from the bodies in this world, they will not merit the life of the world to come. Rather, even in the world to come, they will be cut off. So now, here he's telling you what, in essence, someone that's righteous has, Olam HaBa, which is great, wonderful, and so on and so forth. And there's obviously a lot more details, even more so in the second halacha. But the point is, he says that there's righteous and there's wicked. This is the 13 principles of faith. Righteous get merit and get Olam HaBa, wicked lose Olam HaBa. So now, this first halacha was originally the reason. Chazal explains that many of the sages that didn't read the entire Mishneh Torah, that haven't gotten to his Sanhedrin, part of his Mishneh Torah, this is the reason why they wanted to burn these books. This is the reason why many of the sages went against the Rambam. They said that the way that he described Olam HaBa, reward and punishment, was completely insufficient. where when he said that the retribution is just losing Olam HaBa, and that's it, what it seems like on the first halakha. It's still, when you go to the fifth halakha, it gives more details. But in the first halakha, it seems like it's either you get Olam HaBa or you don't get anything. They said it was so far away from really what happens that they wanted to mamash cancel out this entire series. Why? It says because you didn't talk about Gehinom. He says someone losing their Olam HaBa seems like a fairy tale. Like, okay, so you didn't go to play with the kids. Big deal. You didn't get the ice cream. You didn't get the reward. You didn't get the trophy award. You didn't get the participation award. No, they said, no. In the introduction of chapter 10 of the Sanhedrin, the Rambam states what karet really means. And he says that the most severe punishment that the soul receives is karet, but this is not intended to imply that there's no other retribution. On the contrary, here there's the details of what happens to those that sin, what happens to those that don't get Olam HaBa, and Hashem Yerachem, they get serious Gehinom. They're not having Olam HaBa is the least of their worries. The suffering that they get instead of Olam HaBa is what people thought he wasn't teaching. So in the fifth halakha, he actually says the retribution beyond which there's no greater punishment than this, is when a soul is cut off and will not merit the world to come. This is referring to the obliteration of the soul. Which is, he uses the verse in Psalm 55:24, which is the pit of destruction is referring to Be'er Shachat. So, and then he gives the 7 different names for this nullification of the soul, but all of it is referring to these 7 different names, which the Gemara talks about. These are the 7 different names of Gehinom. Now, I'm not going to obviously go give you guys a shiur about Gehinom right now, but to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. So no one says that they don't know. In the book Reshit Chochmah, Shar HaYirah, it says, והרשע שיחריש עניין גיהנום נאמר לו שילך למדבר ששם בקיעי דקורח. He says anyone that teaches Torah, but he tries to darken the issue of Gehinom, meaning as if it doesn't exist. Unfortunately, this sounds very similar to today's teaching, which is, no, Gehinom is like a washing machine. It's a washing machine. You go there for a year, you get washed a little bit, like a thorough car cleaning, and everything's okay. So first and foremost, Chazal explains, this is giving many sources, but here he's talking about this person that actually is using euphemisms to minimize what the Gehinom really is, what the punishment for sin is. He's considered 100% a Rasha. He's considered a Rasha. Why? Because he's leading people to have false beliefs. And how do we know that there is such a thing as Gehinom? In the Gemara Masechet Eruvin, page 19a, it says, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Shiva Shemot yesh lo leGehinom ve'elu hem, שאול ואבדון, באר שחת, באור שעון, טיט היבן, וצל מוות, וארץ תחתית. It says there are 7, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, who actually saw Gehinom. There's a whole Gemara about it, of how he met Eliyahu Navi, and Eliyahu Navi showed him Gehinom. And he says that there are actually 7 names for Gehinom in the Torah. There are 7 names for it. And he gives the verses in from the prophet Jonah, from Tehillim, from Psalms, from the prophet Yeshaya, which is Isaiah, several verses, and also in the 5 books of Moses. For example, one of them being the Parashat Korach. So we have 7 different names for Gehinom. One of them is Sheol, which we learn in Parashat Korach. That's when the ground opened up, and it says that Korach and his family, except his kids, fell into Sheol. One time it's called Sheol, another time it's called Sheolah. So here the Gemara says that is another name for Gehinom. In another place in the Gemara it says that there's 3 openings for Gehinom. One of them is in the desert where Korach is. One of them is in Yerushalayim, and one of them is in the sea. One of them is somewhere in the ocean. So first name is Sheol, that's what Korach is. And a Rasha that minimizes the issues of Gehinom says that Gehinom doesn't exist, or it's a Christian belief, or it's not part of Judaism, or it's not really such a big deal, it's a washing machine that just goes away after a year. He is considered 100% a Rasha according to the Torah, and the reason why is because he's giving people false belief. So that's one. Second thing is, it's called Avadon. Avadon we learn from Tehillim. Another one is Be'er Shachat, another one is Bor Sha'on, another one is Tita Yaven, Tzalmavet. Tzalmavet is also in Tehillim. And another one is Eretz HaTachtit, which is actually in Vayikra. So here we have the whole issue of Gehinom being very much a very real thing. So now the next question is, what is this that everybody keeps saying about how there's only a year in Gehinom, it's just a washing machine? Where do they get that from? In the Gemara Masechet Rosh Hashanah, page 17, it talks about how there's a Gehinom and that the trial is 1 year. The trial is 1 year. There's no such thing as Gehinom is 1 year. Gehinom could be eternity. But according to Reshit Chochmah, which uses at least no less than 5 different sources, he says that the minimum sentence in Gehinom is 20 years. The minimum sentence in Gehinom is 20 years. Nowhere here, not that I remember this by heart, this whole book, but here in Perek Shlishi, in Sha'ar HaYirah, it talks about Rabbi Meir Mishum Rabbi Elazar. Says, Kashe Yom Adin she'akadosh Baruch Hu dan et ha'adam bekever yoter midin shel Gehinom, din Gehinom me-20 shana u'lemala. Says that the judgment of Gehinom is 20 years or more. Possible. But there's another place also that says the same thing, or something a little bit more. Point being is that this 1 year thing is definitely for sure not a rule of thumb. It could be less, could be more. It could be none. It could be nothing if you're righteous. But to just say that everybody goes to Gehinom for 1 year and there's no source for that. There's only source for 1 year is that the trial is 1 year. Now, as far as what happens in Gehinom, I don't think you guys really want to go over that. That's really, really horrific. But there's a midrash, famous one that I think one of the one of the Israeli rabbis did a very, very scary video about, and it talks about this specific one from Reshit Chochmah. It says Rabbi Yoshua that met with Eliyahu Navi. Eliyahu Navi came to Rabbi Yoshua and he asked him, "Do you want to see Gehinom?" He said yes. And he showed him what's in Gehinom, and then he reports what he saw. And the visual is a nightmare, times a million, of what he describes that he saw. So, since it's late, and then I don't think it's necessarily relevant for everyone to know, we're not going to go through every detail, but whatever you're imagining, times it by 1,000. It's worse. So, to give you guys a small, tiny idea of, even though it's only souls and not bodies, it says that he saw all types of people hanging. And they hang by the parts of their body that's sinned. So if they sinned with their sex organs, that's where they're hanging from. If they sinned with their eyes, that's where they're hanging from. If they sinned with their hands, that they're hanging from. If it's with their mouth, that's what they're hanging from. But he gives a lot more details than what I'm giving you. The point is that this entire book is very, very, very scary. This is where this has Masechet Gehinom. This is where we get all of our, really most of our information about it. There's a few other books about it as well. But the key is to understand that Gehinom is very, very much a real part of Torah. It's not a Christian belief. It's not, even though they believe it, they got all their information from us. It's not some, faraway place. It's real. And it's actually necessary for all of you to believe in it. Because the only way you're going to avoid it is by believing in it first. So therefore you understand what you're dealing with. Now, to finish off everything, people always ask, why is it that rebuke is rare, but at the same time the Torah says that it's necessary? Because in the prophet Jeremiah says, and also in Masechet Chagigah, page 14a, that the Bet HaMikdash was not destroyed. Hashem didn't decide to destroy the Bet HaMikdash until he officially saw that there's no more people to actually rebuke anyone. No one was willing to rebuke anyone anymore. He says now, since there's no one to rebuke anyone anymore, there's no way anyone's going to do tshuva. And if no one's going to do tshuva, might as well destroy it. It's just going to get worse from here. The Rambam Ilchot Tshuva, and also in a, I believe it's also in, talks about rebuke, but there's actually even more in a Isurei Be'ah, I believe. Ilchot Deot. Ilchot Deot, it gives you the laws of rebuking. But one of the main things that it talks about is that someone that does not rebuke, someone who doesn't rebuke, a person that is, let's say, for example, violating a rabbinical mitzvah because he thinks he's not going to listen, that's one thing. But that does not relieve him from the mitzvah of rebuking. Many people think that if someone is not going to listen, then you're absolved. You don't need to rebuke him. That's only on rabbinical mitzvot. It's only on rabbinical mitzvot, and it's only on things that are not from the Torah, not deoraita. If someone is violating Shabbat, you have to rebuke him, regardless of whether they listen or not. To such an extent that the Rambam says in chapter 6 of Ilchot Deot, he lists and also in Ilchot Tshuva 4.1, he talks about how the failure to rebuke is one of the 4 sins that's so severe that Hashem will take away this person's ability to do tshuva. Meaning that if someone refuses to rebuke other people, Hashem is going to put him in a situation where he himself can't do tshuva. He's not going to have siyata dishmaya. Obviously everyone can do tshuva, but he's going to remove his siyata dishmaya. So when do we have to rebuke? We have to rebuke anything that's any mitzvah that's deoraita. If you see somebody driving on Shabbat, you have to rebuke him. If you see some, huh? Okay, so that's a good question. So this is exactly what he talks about. This is why I connected to this one. He says, okay, when it comes down to a biblical sin, when it's a biblical sin, initially you have to try to rebuke them privately, without humiliating them. If it's a biblical sin, if it's Shabbat, if it's Eshet Ish, she's with a woman that's not allowed to be with, or anything like that. But if it's initially private, but if he continues to sin after you've rebuked him, he continues to drive on Shabbat, he continues to violate the Torah, not just a rabbinical sin that like Netilat Yadayim. He continues to violate the Torah, you have 100% permission from the Torah to embarrass him in public. Here he says, he may be put to shame. This is actually what it says in the halakha here. He may be put to shame in public. And his sin may be publicized. Meaning you could actually put a bulletin board in the middle of the highway, Joe drives on Shabbat.
So the same thing that now religious
Exactly. Why? Because they're violating the Torah. Violate Torah, you have to. They're not considered someone that you're not allowed to embarrass. They're beneath that. They're not following the law, so therefore they actually get abused by the law. He may be subjected to abuse, to scorn, and curses until he repents, as was the practice of all the prophets of Israel. This is actually what the prophets used to do. So this is actually part of the reason why the prophets were killed. But nonetheless, when someone does a biblical sin, you actually are allowed to embarrass them. Now, of course, Shulchan Aruch also talks about of how you should do everything you possibly can to not embarrass them. We're not here to start throwing rocks at people, to embarrass them. You have to do things in a nice way, bring them a lecture, send them a lecture, give them a CD, talk to them, convince them. You definitely get, invite them for Shabbat. You get more with bees with honey than you do with something else. But the point being is that if someone continues to talk in shul, ruining everybody else's tefillah, you're allowed to embarrass them in public. This is, again, not an open ticket to embarrassing people in public, but this is to make sure that we all understand where is the line. Where is this line of not being allowed to embarrass people in public? Can they just desecrate Hashem's name and we don't have to say anything? We have to be quiet? Like people said, no, listen, this attack against Dweck, this rabbi that said homosexuality is okay and is great, it's Chilul Hashem, it's embarrassing in public. No, it's not. You actually have to do it. Why? Because you went against the Torah. And Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin says in a place that there's Chilul Hashem, there's no consideration for kavod. There's no consideration for honor or anything like that. It's off limits. So this is the last of it, and that's one of the most important things that you need to understand. One story I tell you from Tana Devei Eliyahu. Hashem came to Joshua, to Yeshua, after the Gedol after Moshe Rabbeinu, and he said, why do you use such a language to frighten my people? You tell all my people, Hashem's not going to forgive you, Hashem's going to punish you, there's Gehinom, there's this. Why? Why do you say I'm not forgiving? Didn't I forgive them after they complained about me 10 times in the desert? Didn't I forgive them after the idol worship? Didn't I forgive them after they complained about the man? Didn't I forgive them after all these things? Didn't I forgive them? Well, he's saying Lashon Hara Amir. He's asking Yeshua. He's saying Lashon Hara about me. Yeshua says, I only did it to scare them, so they listen to what you say. And Hashem Yitbarach, Eliyahu Navi writes this. Eliyahu Navi is Tana Devei Eliyahu. Eliyahu Navi writes this, he says, Hashem Yitbarach kissed his hands. Kissed Yeshua's hands and his forehead, thanking him. Hashem, I don't know what that means, he kissed his hands. All I know is Hashem doesn't kiss my hands. So, meaning that Hashem's strategy of rebuke is the same thing. This is not new. This is not an innovation. This is the way it's always been until the last few hundred years. But we need to know what Gehinom is. We need to know what Olam HaBa is. We need to know what losing Olam HaBa is. Because we need to know the price in order to know what's on the line. Once we know what's on the line, it doesn't matter what the details are of how much suffering is, how much suffering. You just need to know there's a bad place, there's a good place. Get to the good place, because the bad place you don't want to be in. You don't need to know where you're hanging from and how you're hanging. You just need to know there's a hanging. And B'ezrat Hashem, we all do tshuva, we all click closer to Hashem Yitbarach. We all actually do what Hashem wants, the way He wants it, not start creating rules. And B'ezrat Hashem, do tshuva.
I've heard enough. New arrival screams, echoing through the hallway to know that this ain't good. Once they pass them through the infierno, they don't come back. It's enough to make you go crazy.
Do not think we fear you, Spirit. We know your power is born of evil. This is your last night in the land of the living. You understand me, malevolent demon?
There are no shortcuts, no tricks, no magic. The very cave you fear possesses the cure you seek. Go within. Just know, once you cross that threshold, there is only one way out.
There was a rich family that lived here called the Hetheringtons, and unfortunately, their daughter passed away of a heart attack inside the house. Basically, they were so devastated that they reached out to people claiming to be psychic mediums. They actually weren't psychic mediums. They opened up a total of 11 portals inside this house and invited spirits and entities from all different kinds of dimensions.
Well, I think there are certain pieces of evidence that there is an afterlife.
Resurrection of the dead is affirmed pretty clearly in the Talmud and the Midrash.
To be honest with you, to give this lecture is a nightmare. If it was up to me, I wouldn't. There's going to be some graphic details.
This place is a maze.
The person after death went to a place called Sheol.
This is by far the largest near-death experience study that has ever been conducted.
People go to a place and they experience weird things. And sometimes they actually will see a character of some type. Well, where did that come from?
I don't know why that one chain is swinging back there.
They may describe feeling profoundly peaceful, seeing a bright, warm, welcoming light. Some people describe watching doctors and nurses working on them with incredible accuracy.
Next thing I knew, I was above my body watching the operation.
How long did you feel like you were gone?
I went to a place of timelessness. And so what that means, it could have been a second, could have been 5 minutes. I don't know.
Can you imagine waking up from your sleep and not being able to move?
As I'm lying there, I realized that there's an evil presence next to me.
Do you believe that angels, demons exist?
Holy dude, get out of here! Oh my god, dude!
Strange things keep happening. Bizarre nightmares, as if I'm on fire.
Whoa, what the hell is this? Man, I've got bad chest pain.
Satan's Hollow is what it's called, the portal to hell.
Some people calling it an eye of fire, while others said it looked like the portal to hell opening up.
And the next thing I know, I was outside of my body, looking at my body.
What I'm going to do is called claromancy, the art of throwing lots or throwing bones.
2,000 years of experience, passed down, recorded, of how demons work.
God has them all on a leash, and he lets the leash go enough to let them tempt us, because that's what makes us spiritually stronger.
I'm trying to be as graphic as possible so you understand what we're talking about.
It's your ticket to reality. It's your ticket to freedom. It's your ticket to immortality.
Is there an afterlife? Is there a
This
God?
is the type of information that can keep you away from the Yetzirah.
What happens to us after we die?